Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, but we're going to head up towards Stockholm once again, and we're going to return to a brewery who have featured on the channel a good number of times before. If memory serves me correctly, this must be the 12th or so review involving this brewery and the different brands of beer that they've had. But this is one that I think could be quite interesting. It seems a little bit quirky compared to the other ones we've had from them before, so fingers crossed it's another good one. I have enjoyed the beers I've had from these guys before. So for this review then, we are going to go to Ekerö, which is to the southwest of central Stockholm, and we're having a look at another beer from Northern Exposure Brewing Company, who of course used to go by the name Nordic Kiwi Brewers. This particular beer is called the Woodland Winter Ipa. It's part of the Microcosm series that they have. It comes in at 6.3% ABV, and it's an IPA with a little bit of juniper berry added to it. So I think this could be quite quirky. As you always get with the IPAs from Northern Exposure, it's got a very impressive hop bill in it, and you know, that I think is something we will talk about a little bit later on, because these guys are very interesting in terms of hops. But yeah, this beer was released as part of the Lokal Småskaligt assortment in Systembolaget here in Sweden for November of 2020, and this is my first beer from them in a couple of months actually. The last beer that I reviewed from them was the Dark Side of the Room, which was a porter. I don't think it was an imperial porter. I'm sure it was just a regular porter, but that was very, very nicely done, and I do hope that these guys produce a few more dark beers in the future, because that one was really quite interesting, I thought, and I would love to see these guys do some lagers and things like that as well. It'd be cool to see these guys experiment a little bit more with different styles, because it is mainly IPAs that they're brewing. But the beer that I would really recommend you check out from Northern Exposure if you're trying them for the first time would be the Dolphin Love. That's a really, really solid New England hazy IPA. They do have other interesting beers as well, so you can always check those out, but if you want to get a proper feel for what this brewery is all about, I think Dolphin Love, their kind of flagship IPA, really will show you that actually. So I would highly recommend that you have a go at that beer if you get the chance. There's some really nice stuff there. So yeah, cool to return to these guys again after quite a little while. As I say, this is about my 12th time reviewing a beer from these guys, you know, when we include the Nordic Kiwi stuff as well. So curious to see what this is all about. It should be a little bit quirky, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well. So let's see how we get on then. As always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done it from Northern Exposure Brewing Company before, and I will put a link into the Nordic Kiwi ones as well. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Nordic Kiwi Brewers then, or not Nordic Kiwi Brewers, bad habit, Northern Exposure Brewing Company then, on to my brewery notes. So as I've mentioned to you earlier, this brewery was originally founded as Nordic Kiwi Brewers, and they're based in Ekerö to the west of Stockholm, and they were founded by two New Zealanders, Craig Donovan and Karen Beattie, back in 2014. So apparently they began home brewing in Sweden because, you know, Swedish beer is quite expensive, although I'm surprised that they would find it more expensive than New Zealand. I do remember the beers in New Zealand being quite expensive, particularly compared to the Swedish ones, but soon after that they began buying hops from Nelson back home in New Zealand, very good hop producing region, but they set up a commercial brewery in a room using equipment that they'd found mainly on Blocket, which is basically the Swedish equivalent of like Craigslist or whatever. But Karen apparently met his Swedish lady in New Zealand, and then the pair moved to London together, and he spent some time working in the construction industry before they moved to Sweden. And Karen worked full time at the brewery initially, while Craig was part time and also worked for Ericsson. But I believe since 2017 they both work full time at the brewery. But the niche of this brewery originally was that they brewed all of their beers with New Zealand hops. But in late 2018 they moved to a larger brewery in Ekerö, and that year they brewed around 100,000 litres of beer, and they doubled that in 2019. But they also hired a new brewer from New Zealand who came to join them. and they've just put in a new brewing system in the brewery as well, from what I understand. But at the end of 2019, they also made the decision to change the brewery name to Northern Exposure Brewing Company, and they say that the main reason for this was that the Swedes just didn't really get the kiwi reference. Of course, the kiwi is the little flightless bird, and it's one of the national symbols of New Zealand, of course. But the thing was, I mean, when I reflect on this a little bit now, their artwork and stuff that they had was just NKB, and you know, I think it would have made a little bit more sense if they had like a little roundel or something with the kiwi bird in it and put a story like that on the cans, because I was a little bit sad that they got rid of that whole Nordic kiwi sort of thing, because I do like the fact that they said, right, we're from New Zealand and we are brewing all these New Zealand beers. So I was a little bit sad about that, but you know, I can understand exactly why they did it, because you know, Northern Exposure Brewing Company, it is a little bit more of a kind of international name, if you like, actually. So, although in fairness, Nordic Kiwi Brewers was as well. But yeah, basically, since they've changed the name, the brewery business has been a success, and that's the main thing for what you want. But as of November 2020, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've produced around 20 different beers under the Northern Exposure name, and they're now brewing with hops from all over the world, but still mainly New Zealand hops. So there's not an exclusive New Zealand hop thing at the moment anymore. It is mainly New Zealand hops. You will find usually their beers have got like one American hop and 2 or 3 New Zealand things in them, but yeah, they are always very interesting. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Northern Exposure Brewing Company and Nordic Kiwi Brewers for the moment. Very interesting company, and I do hope that we can get these guys on the channel at some point for a Meet the Brewery segment. They did say last time that they would like to do that, but of course there's a big distance between Lund and Stockholm, so we'll need to arrange for that to happen properly, and we'll see about that. I don't know when I'm next going to be up in Stockholm. It's not somewhere that is so easily accessible, I guess, from Lund, especially at the moment with the whole COVID-19 situation. But yeah, I do need to get up to Stockholm and to Gothenburg and do some filming with some of the different breweries and stuff like that. That's maybe something that will need to happen during the summer next year, in summer 2021. So we will see about getting that done. But yeah, always nice to review different beers from these guys. And like I said, I would really recommend that you try the Dolphin Love if you get the chance. So yeah, that's all I can really tell you about these guys for the moment. If you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all those different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's see how we got on with this one then. So yeah, I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open it up. As you can see, a little bit different from the other ones that we had. The other beers that we had, such as the Crossing Borders or Crossing Boundaries and the Dolphin Love, those have got like a kind of white background, which is of course quite typical of a number of breweries these days, the kind of minimalist artistic style. But this one is a little bit different. As I say, this is part of the Microcosm series that they have. They do have one in this series called Fjord, which is a Kvike double IPA, and I really hope that I can get a taste of that at some point. I'm not sure if they'll release that maybe next month or something, but I would love to have a go at this. And when I was looking on Systembolaget earlier, actually, they've got quite a few Brut IPAs listed in there, but I'm not sure how fresh they are, because otherwise I would consider ordering them and reviewing a few more beers, because it's been a while actually, and a lot of the ones that are in Systembolaget there I've not seen before, and I don't know if I missed these through the Lokala Småskaligt or whatever, but yeah, this is the first one I've noticed in the Lokala Småskaligt for quite a little while. So yeah, this one I think should be quite interesting. So to tell you a little bit about the beer itself, as I told you at the start of the video, this one is a 6.3% IPA with Juniper added to it. The hops in this beer are Motueka, Pacific Jade, Pacifica and Waiti. All of these are from New Zealand, and I do have a little bit of data about these hops here as well, because I think with this brewery and of course with the 50/50 series we have from OO Brewing, I do like to just talk about the hops a little bit more. So yeah, to tell you about these different hops then, the New Zealand hops, Pacific Jade, this one comes in between 11 and 12% alpha acid. It's derived from Sats, Czech Sats hops, or Žatec as they call it, and also the New Zealand First Choice, and it gives you a sort of lemony, citrusy character. Motueka is one that we are a little bit more kind of familiar with these days. It's actually very low alpha acid, but 6 to 8% alpha acid normally. Formerly it used to be known as Belgian Sats apparently, which I didn't know, and this one I think gives you a sort of I have always found it gives you a little bit of a limey character, but it can give you some kind of tropical fruit notes as well. Pacifica comes in even lower at 5 to 6% alpha acid. This one's derived from an open pollination of a Hallertau hop variety, and this gives you quite a big orangey note. And Waiti, I was very surprised about this. Apparently, it only gives you between 2.5 and 3.5% alpha acid, and it gives you a lot of lime and tropical notes as well. Actually, I'm really surprised at how low alpha acid that is. But that just means, of course, they'll use it more. They'll add it later in the boil, rather than early on. As I've told you in these videos before, the way to add hops, or what you want out of hops, it just depends. If you want bitterness, you add it within the first hour or so, and if you want flavour and aroma, you add it within the last half hour, or of course as a dry hop. So yeah, just bear that in mind when it comes to these. But yeah, really impressive hop build, this one. 4 different New Zealand hops in here, and it's got a wee bit of juniper berry in it from what I understand as well. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm really curious to see what this has in store for us. So yeah, I'm curious about whether I'm trying to remember, right, is it regular gin or slow gin that has that they use juniper berries in? Actually, I think it's slow gin, but yeah, this one's definitely a bit darker than some of the other ones we've come across before. But yes, 6.3% New England, or well, it looks like a New England IPA, this one. So it's an IPA of some description. I'm sure we'll determine that as we go through the beer. But as you can see, this beer is poured with about a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say cream coloured head. That's fading away to just be a very, very thin foamy layer, and it's leaving a little bit of a ring around the edge of the glass. But as you can see, this beer has poured quite a rich orangey colour. That's definitely a more kind of rich, almost ambery colour rather than anything else. But it does have a fair degree of haze to it. Although it's definitely not the haziest of beers. It looks a little bit more kind of murky because of the colour. But remember, the colour of your beer is dependent on 2 things. One, the length of the boil. The longer you boil the beer, the more caramelised the sugars you get, and then the kind of thicker and darker the beer is going to get. But it's also dependent on the actual types of malts that you use. So probably, I would guess from the colour of this one, it must have a little bit of like caramel or caramunic, or something like this in it to give it this sort of more ambery colour. So yeah, that's probably the main reason kind of behind that with this one. But yeah, it certainly looks like a very nice beer. Lovely rich amber colour, pretty hazy as you can see if I put my fingers behind it, but if we put the light through it, you'll see it's definitely not the most hazy IPA that we've come across in recent times, but it certainly looks very, very nice. I think this is the darkest one I've had so far in terms of colour from Northern Exposure. But yeah, let's take a closer look at the aroma of this one then and just see how we get on. Very, very curious about this beer. Ooh, now that does smell quite interesting. You do get a little bit of that junipery thing infused into the malt base there, but I mean, straight away with this one you get that lovely big kind of malty base. It's definitely got a nice bit of a kind of white bready character to it, but at the same time it's got a little bit more of a it's definitely got a little bit more of a kind of how would you say, it's got a little bit more of a kind of bread crusty vibe to it, this one, a little bit of that kind of big bread crusty sort of thing, which I really quite like, I have to say. So thumbs up to the one. This one is definitely more of a malty beer, this one, I think, as well. The malts do have quite a bit more kind of prominence to them, but yeah, lovely kind of bready base, a little bit of a more kind of brown bready bread crust sort of thing in there. You can smell a little bit of the oaty creaminess. I'm just going to check. There are oh no, it just says it's barley malt in this. I would have thought this was quite oaty, because it does have a little bit of that almost kind of creamy character to it. But that's interesting. It doesn't even say wheat malt. It does say barley malt actually. So maybe this one is going to be a little bit more of like a sort of West Coast actually. It's kind of interesting. Yeah, I do like how this how that goes together. Then it'll be interesting with this. But yeah, it does give the impression of a little bit of a slightly oaty creaminess as well. But there's a lot of brown sugar in this one for me. You do get a straight up sweet caramel. It's got a little bit of an almost kind of Werther's Originally type note in there as well. A little bit of that almost butter candy type thing. So yeah. There's a wee bit of a biscuit there as well. You can definitely get some of those kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity notes coming out of this one. So yeah, the aroma of this beer, I think, is very, very nice. Especially on the malty side of things, you'll know that if you've watched the channel before, I love a good bit of a malty backbone to a beer. So this one suits me down to the ground. So yeah, nice big bready backbone, bread crust, and then a good little bit of brown sugar. It does give the impression of a little bit of oaty creaminess. I'm surprised that this beer doesn't have oats based on the aroma, because it just has that kind of smooth character actually, which I think is very nice. So yeah, I really like how this how that goes together in this one. So yeah, it's pretty awesome, I have to say. On the hoppy side of things then, this one's quite interesting. You do get a wee touch of earthiness out of this one, but overall I find this beer really quite bright and floral and aromatic. There's a bit of a zesty kind of grassy character to this one, but I'd say that overall the green side of the hops, it really does lean towards a more kind of floral aromatic side of things, which I really like. So yeah, take a little bit of time to analyse the green side of the hops, because I think the sort of more bitter, I think this beer is going to be a little bit more bitter, that more kind of floral aromatic sort of thing. It's not spicy, it is quite a deep floral aromaticity, and you've got a bit of lighter grassiness to it. That I think really does come out quite nicely in this beer, I have to say. But yeah, you've got a good little bit of a more malty backbone, and the thing is with this beer, you can smell a little bit of the kind of juniper coming out in this one as well. It does have just a little bit of an underlying kind of spicy character. The thing that I remember Juniper being with was the I think about satés, or Gotlandstrika as they're called in Sweden. The kind of satés you get in Finland, the smoked juniper kind of things, those were always really nice, and you do just get a little bit of that juniper infusion throughout the malt base there. But let's focus on the fruity side of these hops now. That's obviously the big thing when it comes to New Zealand. But yeah, that is quite nice. It's got a big oily fruity character, this one, I would say, rather than anything else. I get quite a bit of orange out of this one, and that's the Pacifica. It's going to give you that, I do notice that, but there is a little bit of zestiness there from the, there is a little bit of that kind of lemony zesty kind of quality, and I think that is the, was that the Pacific Jade that gives you that? I think the Pacific Jade was the one that gives you the sort of limey character. So yeah, there is a wee bit of that. Sorry, there is a wee bit of that more kind of lemony zesty sort of thing, especially if you take the nose in a little bit more kind of deeply. So yeah, nice little bit of a lemony zesty character. Yeah, nice big lemony zesty sort of thing, a big orangey, oily orangey character to it. But yeah, you do get a nice little bit of a kind of more oily lime in there as well. I've always found that in beers, lime and orange really kind of go hand in hand. So Motueka and Waiti are both going to give you that kind of character out of the beer. So you can smell that almost sitting underneath the Pacific on this one. So this beer really gives the impression of a big oily fruit, and you do get a bit more of that kind of zesty quality from the Pacific Jade right on the kind of tip of the nose. Is there a bit more to it? I mean, there's maybe a little bit of like an almost passion fruity type quality to this one, and behind that it does have a little bit of a brighter tropical note to it, but I really find this one more kind of citrusy and things, and oily and citrusy, rather than kind of tropical and stuff like that. So that kind of suits it. If it's intended as a winter IPA, then I think that profile kind of suits the beer, to be honest with you. So yeah, quite a big oily thing this. So I'm curious to see whether this is more like a West Coaster rather than anything else. So yeah, take a little bit of time and enjoy that aroma before you get stuck into it. But we're going to have a taste of this beer now and just see how we get on. So this one is the Woodland Winter IPA, part of the Microcosm series at Northern Exposure Brewing Company in Ekerö, just out to the kind of southwestish of central Stockholm. Curious to see what this beer has in store for us, and nice to return to them after a little while. Slanja, Skull, and as they used to say on the NKB cans, Char. Yeah, that's quite an interesting one, that actually. It's a very kind of smooth beer, this one, I have to say. Yeah, this is really interesting, this one. It comes across really kind of smooth and clean and stuff like this. The juniper, I mean, it's the juniper, I think. It does have, this beer has a really nice kind of smooth breadiness to it, but the further you go into the aftertaste with it, you get that kind of junipery infusion out of it. Actually, this really is very quirky compared to the other ones I've had from these guys before. But I like it. I do like it. I do like that slightly more malty presence that this beer has. So yeah. So yeah, where to start with this one then? Straight away with this beer, you do get a nice little bit of a kind of bready backbone there. The juniper, I think that the juniper kind of forms like the base of the beer, and it really gives it like a sort of almost spicy backbone. It reminds me a little bit, I've not had juniper in a beer for a long time, but what it does remind me of that I've had fairly recently is like, it reminds me of a little bit of that kind of cedar spice sort of thing that you get. I've had quite a few cedar barrel aged sakes, and more recently than I've had juniper, and it really, the backbone of the beer, it really reminds me of that. So it's almost as if the kind of first layer on the tongue is just a little bit almost like woody and spicy. Actually, that's what the juniper is contributing to this beer for me. That's what I really feel about that. But on top of that, you do get a nice kind of pale malty bready sort of thing. You do get that. It does smoothen out a little bit. The juniper almost comes out more towards the very edge of the tongue, just inside of where you get the hops, on the very sides of your palate. So it's quite interesting that you'll feel the spiciness here just kind of sort of just drop off a little bit. So that's definitely an interesting point to make about this one. So yeah, I think that is really kind of, for me it is quite crazy actually. I do like, as I say, how this goes together. Yeah, it's lovely. This gets a thumbs up from me. It's one of these beers, when I tried it I was like, but once you let the beer open up a little bit, I think it does start to grow on you. So yeah, as I say, you've got that kind of junipery, almost cedary type base there, and a bit of the kind of pale malt and white bready note just sitting on top of that. I think as you go further back onto the back third of your tongue, it becomes a little bit more bread crusty. As you let the flavour progress, you can feel the bread just thickening up a wee bit on that back third of your palate as well. But yeah, and so when you move into the middle third of your palate, you can feel it's got that nice light bready layer, but it's also got a little bit of it's got a little bit of a kind of oily circle in the middle of the tongue, and that's where the kind of sweeter malty side of things comes out actually. So yeah, this one, I think it does sweeten up a little bit the further that you go into the aftertaste as well, and that's one of the things that this, I can see why they would make this as a winter IPA, because it really does it does have a little bit of that kind of spicy winter warmery type vibe to it, which is quite interesting. But yeah, in the very centre of your palate, you're going to get a little bit of a sweet caramel to this one. It almost does come across as a little bit toasted. It's not madly sweet, and as you move further out from that very centre of your tongue, it does get a wee bit more kind of it does, the brown sugars do get a little bit more almost roasty, toasty and slightly grainy as well actually. This beer does get a little bit more grainy and spicy, I think, the further that you go into the aftertaste. So yeah, I think that covers the malty side of this beer a little bit as well. I think one thing I've just thought about in my head there is I think I've said juniper berries, pardon me, in this one. I'm not actually sure whether it is juniper or juniper berries that's been added into this one. It doesn't say on the things. I would have thought they would have to say that it had I thought they would have had to say that there was juniper berries in this. It did say on Untappd that there was juniper berry in this. So yeah, it does have a wee bit of that kind of spicy quality to it, and it makes sense with the kind of artwork and things that they have. Otherwise they put a bit of pine needles into it or something like that. It does definitely have a little bit of an adjuncty sort of spice to it. I would say that about this one. But yeah, it's nice this. I like the malt base to this, and it suits the whole vibe of being a winter IPA. So on the hoppy side of things then, back corners of the palate you do have a little bit of earthiness to this one, but as you move further forward you start to get that nice big deep floral aromaticity to the beer. As you go round the front curve of the palate, it's a little bit lighter and more grassy, and I really like that too. And I think, yeah, the grassiness does have a wee bit of zestiness to it as well. So I think on the green side of the hops it is quite floral and aromatic, and it comes across as being quite deep in a sense. So yeah, I do like how that goes together too. It kind of suits the deepness of the floral aromaticity, kind of suits the slightly spicy vibe that this beer has. But yeah, on the front third of the palate, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So let's try and focus on that a little bit, because this one is quite a citrusy leaning beer for me, this. So yeah, again, the fruits are quite oily in this. If you go towards the back of that front third of your palate, you do get a little bit of a kind of passion fruity note out of it, but very quickly as you move further forward it does develop to be more kind of citrusy, if you like. So the passion fruity note, I think, is going to come from the Motueka can give you a little bit of those tropical fruit notes as well as that big limey character. But yeah, on the front 2/3, if you like, of that front third of your tongue, if that makes sense. What even would that be in fractions? I don't know. The first 2/9 of your tongue or something. You do get a more you get an oily sort of limey vibe underneath that, but on top of it you get a quite strong orangey note. Like I say, it'll be the Motueka and the Waiti, if you like, that are going to give you those big kind of limey notes. The Pacifica is sitting on top of that, and that's the one that's going to give you the orangey note. And even the fruits come across as almost slightly spiced in a way, to be honest with you. That's kind of how potent the sort of junipery, spicy aspect to this beer is. But as you go onto the very kind of front edge of the tongue, it has the Pacific Jade showing its head. It's got that more kind of zesty, lemony quality to it as well. So I quite appreciate that about this beer as well. The big nice, the nice big sort of lemony zesty quality that it has. So it's quite cool that all of the hops in this really show their colours, if you like. So just to summarise that again, bit of passion fruit at the back. As you move further forward, it's got a bit more kind of, you can feel the lime sort of in the base underneath, and then you get the more orangey qualities on top, and then a nice kind of lemony zesty quality there on the kind of on the very kind of tip of the tongue too. So it's quite an interesting beer, this one, in terms of the flavour composition actually. Quite lemony and zesty, nice and big and floral, and also a little bit of a spicy character in the malt base too. So I think that sums this one up pretty nicely. In terms of the mouthfeel then, what are we going to say about that? It's quite, yeah, I would describe this beer as being quite mid-bodied. The carbonation is quite smooth on this, but at the same time it's got a kind of balance between being a little bit clean and a little bit more oily. As I said, from the aroma I was getting the impression of an oaty creaminess to this, but yeah, you don't really get that in the vibe of this beer actually. I would say that about it. But yeah, in terms of hoppy bitterness, I think this one is maybe... I think you're getting a bit of spiciness from the juniper, and it's quite difficult to draw a conclusion as to where the hoppiness ends and the spiciness begins. Maybe this one could be about 40-ish IBUs, something like that. It does feel as if it's a little bit more bitter. It could be about 40, maybe even 50 IBUs at a push, something like that. But yeah, malt base, like I say, quite smooth, bit of spiciness underneath. The spiciness develops as you go on, bit of brown sugar in there, and then the fruitiness for me, it's got a good bit of zestiness, but then it's quite oily at the same time too, which suits the overall vibe of the beer. But I like this one. This is definitely a quirky beer, and I think, you know, one of the quirkier beers I had from these guys was the Oh Dear, and it had like red beets or something in it, and that beer for me just didn't turn out all that nice. And unfortunately that was the first beer that I reviewed from them under the Northern Exposure name. So I mean, what I would say about this one is, the question would be, is this the best beer that Northern Exposure have done? I don't know about that, but it's a solid beer, this, but I would say that it's not my favourite one that they've done. But I think Dolphin Love is such a good beer that's quite an obstacle to. It's quite a pedestal, that, to be honest, for this one to kind of compare to. So yeah, Dolphin Love is such a good beer that in some ways I think it would be hard for these guys to top that, at least in my opinion. But is this a really nice IPA? It is, it definitely is. So it's another solid beer from these guys, and you can't ask for more than that, really. As I say, I think it will be hard for them to knock the Dolphin Love off the pedestal that it has. but they've produced another solid beer here, and I've certainly enjoyed this one. And that's the main thing: try new beers from breweries you know and you enjoy them, and I have with this one. This is more it is a little bit more kind of west coasty and oily and things, so this one is quite different from the beers that I've had from them before. I would love to see them do like a properly old school west coast New Zealand hopped IPA. I think that would be a really interesting thing for them next. You know, do something in the style of like Sierra Nevada Torpedo or Pliny the Elder with the New Zealand hops. I'd love to see these guys do something like that, like a high bitterness, caramelly, fruity, oily IPA. That's what I think I'd love to see these guys do next time. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. For me, this is a really nice winter IPA. I think the Juniper adds a bit of spice to it. It's a little bit quirky, this one. It is one of the more, is one of my more the more enjoyable kind of quirky ones I've had from these guys, I should say, but this is only the second properly quirky beer I've had from them. But yeah, I really enjoyed reviewing something else from Northern Exposure for you here on the channel, and I hope that you guys enjoyed my take on this one as well. All four of the hops in this one show their head, which I think is quite nice, and I love trying beers from this brewery because they've got that New Zealand background. I'd love to see these guys do something like Brewing do, like the 100 series. I'd love to see these guys do a series of like single hopped IPAs or something like that. And like I say, for them to do some New Zealand hopped lagers, I think would be a really interesting thing as well. I'd love to see them do some Pilsners and Helles and stuff like that with the different New Zealand hops and show off the fruity characters. You know, New Zealand hops are so good because there was no natural competitors with the hop plants in New Zealand. That's why the hop industry took off down there. So I'd love to see these guys do, as I say, single hop New Zealand IPA series. That would be an awesome thing. Release one every month like Brewing do. I think that would be a really niche market for these guys, and I'd love to see lagers, like I say. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. This one was the Woodland Winter IPA, part of the Microcosm series at Northern Exposure Brewing Company, an IPA with Juniper, coming in at 6.3% ABV. Thank you again for watching my reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Northern Exposure Brewing Company. We will return to these guys at some point in the fairly near future. But yeah, I'll catch you guys on the next review. Slàinte, skål, cheers, make sure you check out this brewery. Skål.